Before we talk about changing habits, setting goals, or chasing success in 2026, we have to pause and ask a deeper question. Not what we want to do differently, not how we plan to improve, but why any of it matters in the first place. Because without that, every plan eventually collapses under pressure. People don't burn out because they work too hard. They burn out because they forget why they're working at all. Over time, something subtle happens. We start our journeys driven by meaning, but slowly, almost invisibly, meaning gets replaced by motion. We stay busy. We stay productive. We stay occupied. And from the outside, it looks like progress. But inside, something feels off. The work feels heavier. The motivation feels fragile. The excitement we once had feels distant. That's not because we failed. It's because we drifted. Drift happens when we stop checking in with ourselves, when deadlines replace direction, when expectations replace intention, when success becomes about proving something instead of building something that actually matters to us. And the longer we drift, the more exhausted we become, because it takes enormous energy to move forward without knowing where you're going. This is why a reset is necessary. A reset is not about starting over. It's about realigning. It's about peeling back the layers of noise and asking an honest question: why did I start this in the first place? Not the version of the answer that sounds impressive to others, but the one that feels true when no one else is listening. Most people avoid this question because it's uncomfortable. It forces us to confront the gap between who we wanted to become and who we've been acting like lately. It exposes the difference between goals we chose and goals we inherited. But clarity has always required courage. You can't fix what you won't face. When your why is clear, it acts like a filter. Decisions become easier. Distractions lose their power. You stop chasing every opportunity and start committing to the right ones. Without that clarity, everything feels urgent, everything feels important, and eventually everything feels overwhelming. Think about the times you felt most alive in your work or your life. It wasn't when things were easiest, it was when they felt meaningful, when effort had purpose, when sacrifice felt worth it. That didn't come from perfect conditions. It came from alignment, from knowing why the struggle mattered. A reset asks you to return to that place, not emotionally, but intentionally. It's not about recreating the past. It's about reclaiming the principle that guided you before fear, comparison, or routine took over. Because fear has a way of shrinking our vision. Comparison has a way of distorting our priorities, and routine, when left unchecked, can quietly replace purpose with habit. Many people think they need a new plan for 2026. What they actually need is a clearer reason. Plans change, circumstances change, energy rises and falls. But when your reason is strong, you stay grounded even when everything else shifts. That's how resilient people are built, not by having all the answers, but by holding on to the right question, your why. Doesn't need to be dramatic. It doesn't need to impress anyone. It just needs to be true. True enough to guide your choices. True enough to keep you going when motivation fades. True enough to remind you who you are when the world tries to tell you who you should be. And here's the part most people miss. Your why is not something you discover once and keep forever. It evolves, it deepens, it matures as you do. Resetting means giving yourself permission to update it, to admit that you're not the same person you were when you started. Growth doesn't mean abandoning your values, it means expressing them more clearly. In 2026, don't rush into action. Don't fill your calendar before you fill your mind with clarity. Slow down long enough to reconnect with the reason behind your effort. Because when you know why you're moving, you don't need to be pushed. You don't need constant motivation. You move because it makes sense, because it feels right, because it aligns with who you are becoming. A reset is a moment of leadership. Leadership over your time, leadership over your energy, leadership over your direction. It's the decision to stop reacting and start choosing. And once you reset, your why, everything else, goals, habits, discipline, stops feeling forced and starts feeling natural. You don't need to become someone new in 2026. You need to remember who you are and move forward from there. Starting again is one of the bravest decisions a person can make, yet it's often misunderstood. People think restarting means you failed, that you fell behind, that you wasted time. But in reality, restarting usually means you learned enough to know what no longer works. And learning is never a loss, it's information. The problem is not that people fail, the problem is that they cling to paths that no longer make sense, simply because they've already invested time, effort, or identity into them. There is a powerful psychological trap that keeps people stuck. The fear of letting go of what's familiar. Familiar feels safe even when it's painful. Familiar feels predictable even when it's limiting. So we stay, we tolerate, we convince ourselves that persistence means endurance at all costs. But persistence without direction is not strength, it's stagnation. Restarting requires something deeper than motivation. It requires courage. The courage to admit that comfort has replaced growth. The courage to say, this version of my life is no longer aligned with who I am becoming. That sentence alone is enough to stop most people in their tracks, because it forces responsibility back into their hands. And responsibility is heavy when you've been waiting for circumstances to change instead. Most people don't actually fear change. They fear the judgment that comes with change. They fear being questioned. They fear being misunderstood. They fear explaining themselves. So they stay silent and stuck, choosing social approval over personal alignment. But approval has an expiration date. Meaning does not. A real restart doesn't begin with external changes. It begins internally with a shift in standards. You stop asking, what will others think? And start asking, what will it cost me if I don't change? Because staying in the wrong place drains you slowly. It erodes confidence. It turns potential into regret, and regret is far heavier to carry than uncertainty. There's a reason why the most fulfilled people are often those who've started over at least once. They understand that identity is not fixed, it's formed, and every restart refines it. You don't lose yourself when you begin again. You shed what was never truly you. Restarting with courage means choosing honesty over ego. Ego wants consistency, even when it's false. Courage wants alignment, even when it's uncomfortable. Ego says, I've already come this far. Courage says, but is this where I want to go? And that question changes everything. Many people wait for confidence before they restart. But confidence doesn't come first. Clarity does. Confidence is built through action, not contemplation. You don't restart because you feel ready. You feel ready because you restart. Movement creates belief. Stillness breeds doubt. And here's the uncomfortable truth. No one is coming to give you permission. There will be no perfect moment, no universal sign, no applause when you choose yourself. Most restarts happen quietly, in moments of private resolve. They begin when you decide that continuing on autopilot is no longer an option. A courageous restart is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up as small, intentional shifts, a different conversation, a difficult boundary, a new routine, a hard decision repeated consistently. This is how real transformation happens, not through dramatic gestures, but through disciplined honesty. Restarting also means accepting uncertainty. You won't have all the answers. You won't see the full path. But clarity has never required certainty. It requires trust. Trust in your values. Trust in your ability to learn. Trust in your willingness to adapt. People who move forward are not those with the clearest plans, but those with the strongest principles. There will be moments when the old path calls you back, when quitting feels easier than rebuilding, when doubt whispers that you were safer before. That's when courage matters most, not as fearlessness, but as the decision to act despite fear. Courage is not the absence of doubt, it's the refuge. To let doubt make your decisions. In 2026, restarting is not about erasing the past, it's about using it wisely. Every mistake taught you something. Every delay refined your perspective. Every disappointment clarified what you value. A restart is simply the moment you apply those lessons with intention. The cost of restarting is discomfort. The cost of not restarting is regret. One is temporary. The other is permanent. So if you feel that quiet pull telling you something needs to change, don't ignore it. That voice is not weakness. It's awareness. And awareness is the first step toward leadership. Leadership over your choices, your direction, and ultimately your life. Restart not because it's easy. Restart because staying the same is no longer honest. We live in a world that celebrates motion, not direction. Busy calendars are praised, full schedules are admired, constant activity is mistaken for progress. And slowly, almost without noticing, we begin to equate movement with meaning. But doing more has never been the same as doing what matters. In fact, the more distracted we become, the harder it is to see what truly deserves our attention. Focus is not about time management. It's about value management. You always make time for what you believe matters most. When everything feels important, nothing actually is. And when nothing is clear, exhaustion becomes inevitable. Not because you're doing too much, but because you're doing too much of the wrong things. Most people don't lack focus, they lack clarity. They haven't decided what deserves their best energy, so it gets spread thin across obligations, expectations, and endless inputs. Messages, notifications, opinions, comparisons, they all compete for attention. And without a clear filter, you say yes by default, even when it costs you alignment. Refocusing requires a difficult but liberating shift. You stop asking what you can fit into your life and start asking what must be protected. Your energy is unlimited. Your attention is not renewable on demand. Every yes is a withdrawal from a finite account. And if you don't choose intentionally where that energy goes, the world will choose for you. There is a common misunderstanding that focus means restriction. In reality, focus creates freedom. When you know what matters, you no longer feel guilty for what doesn't. You stop explaining yourself. You stop overcommitting. You stop reacting. Clarity replaces chaos, but clarity demands decisions. And decisions demand the willingness to disappoint people, including the version of yourself that once wanted everything. Growth often means letting go of ambitions that no longer align with your values, not because they're bad, but because they're no longer right. The most effective leaders of team, as families or their own lives, understand this deeply. They don't chase urgency, they protect priorities, they understand that distraction is not always obvious. Sometimes it shows up as opportunity, sometimes it shows up as praise, sometimes it shows up as the pressure to stay relevant, but relevance without direction is just noise. Refocusing in 2026 will require discipline, not motivation. Motivation fades. Discipline is built through standards. Standards are the behaviors you hold yourself to even when no one is watching. When your standards are clear, focus becomes a habit, not a struggle. There will be moments when saying no feels uncomfortable, when you worry you're missing out, when you feel behind because others seem to be doing more. But progress is not measured by speed. It's measured by alignment. You can move very fast in the wrong direction and still end up lost. Refocus is not about narrowing your life. It's about deepening it. When attention is scattered, impact is shallow. When attention is concentrated, impact compounds. This is why small, consistent efforts in the right direction outperform frantic effort everywhere else. Another truth people avoid is that distraction is often a form of avoidance. We stay busy to avoid confronting the one thing that truly matters. Focus brings responsibility. It forces you to confront whether your actions match your intentions. And that level of honesty can be uncomfortable. But discomfort is not a sign to stop. It's a sign that you're paying attention. Refocusing also means redefining success. Success is not how much you do. It's how intentionally you do it. It's whether your daily actions reflect your values. It's whether you can look at how you spend your time and feel proud of what it says about you. In 2026, the challenge will not be finding opportunities. The challenge will be choosing the right ones. That choice begins with a simple question: does this move me closer to who I want to become or further away? If the answer is unclear, it's a no. Focus is not rigid. It evolves as you grow, but it must always be deliberate. Otherwise, you drift slowly, silently, and convincingly. When you refocus, you reclaim ownership of your life. You stop being reactive and start being intentional. You stop measuring yourself by external noise and start measuring yourself by internal alignment. And when that happens, progress stops feeling forced. Effort feels purposeful. And success, for the first time in a long time, feels sustainable. Because a focused life is not a smaller life. It's a meaningful one. Most people believe progress comes from intensity, from sudden bursts of motivation, from dramatic moments where everything changes at once. We celebrate the breakthrough, the overnight success, the viral win. But the truth is far less exciting and far more reliable. Real progress comes from consistency. Quiet, unglamorous, often invisible consistency. Motivation is emotional. It rises when things feel exciting and disappears when things feel hard. That's why relying on motivation is risky. Emotions are temporary. Purpose, on the other hand, is steady. And consistency is what connects. 2. Consistency is how purpose shows up in action, even on days when you don't feel like it. Think about trust. Trust is not built in a single moment of effort. It's built through repeated behavior over time. You trust people who show up consistently, not occasionally. The same rule applies to the relationship you have with yourself. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, trust grows. Every time you break one, it erodes. Consistency is self-respect in action. Intensity feels powerful because it gives the illusion of speed. You feel productive. You feel committed. You feel all in. But intensity without sustainability leads to burnout. It asks too much, too fast, without building the systems needed to maintain progress. And when burnout hits, people often blame themselves instead of the strategy. Consistency, by contrast, is humble. It doesn't demand perfection. It only asks for presence. It's not about doing everything. It's about doing the right thing again and again, especially when no one is watching. This is how habits are formed. This is how identities are built. People often wait to feel ready before acting. But readiness is not a prerequisite for consistency. Don't become consistent because you feel confident. You feel confident because you become consistent. Action precedes belief. Repetition creates identity. Over time, what once felt like effort becomes part of who you are. Small actions matter more than big intentions. A single intense effort might impress others. A series of small, consistent efforts changes your life. It's the difference between a spark and a flame. Sparks are exciting. Flames are dependable. There's also a misconception that consistency means doing the same thing forever. It doesn't. Consistency means staying committed to the principle, not the method. The method can change. The principle remains. When people quit too early, it's often because they confuse adjusting the approach with abandoning the goal. Another reason consistency is underestimated is because results are delayed. We live in a world of instant feedback. When progress isn't immediately visible, doubt creeps in. You start questioning whether your efforts matter. But progress compounds quietly, just like trust, just like growth, just like leadership. The people who succeed over the long term are not the most talented or the most motivated. They are the most reliable. They understand that discipline is not punishment. It's structure. It's the framework that allows freedom to exist without chaos. Consistency also removes decision fatigue. When your actions are guided by routine and standards, you don't negotiate with yourself every day. You don't ask whether you should show up. You already decided. This is how high performers conserve energy for what truly matters. In 2026, the goal is not to do more. It's to do better, more often. It's to stop chasing transformation and start practicing alignment, to replace dramatic promises with daily proof. There will be days when effort feels pointless, when progress feels invisible, when stopping feels tempting. Those are the days that matter most, not because they're productive, but because they reinforce identity. Every time you show up on a hard day, you send yourself a message: I am someone who follows through. Consistency doesn't shout, it whispers. But over time, its impact is undeniable. It builds momentum. It builds confidence. It builds credibility with others and with yourself. Intensity makes for great stories. Consistency makes for great lives. And when why, choose consistency. You're not lowering your standards. You're raising them to a level you can sustain. Leadership is often misunderstood as a position, a title, or a role given by others. But real leadership has never worked that way. Leadership is a choice to take responsibility for direction before circumstances force it upon you. And the first place that choice must be made is in an office, a team, or a family. It's in your own life. Many people wait. They wait for motivation. They wait for confidence. They wait for approval. They wait for the right moment. But waiting quietly shifts control away from you. It allows external forces, opinions, expectations, fear, to decide the course of your life. Leadership begins the moment you stop waiting and start choosing. Your own life doesn't mean you have everything figured out. It means you're willing to own your decisions even when outcomes are uncertain. It means you stop blaming conditions and start shaping them, not by force, but by intention. There is a comfort in believing that someone else is responsible, that a system is broken, that circumstances are unfair, and sometimes they are, but responsible. ID and blame are not the same thing. You can acknowledge difficulty without surrendering agency. Leaders understand this distinction. Victims confuse it. When you lead yourself, you stop outsourcing your standards. You decide what you will tolerate and what you won't. You decide how you show up when no one is watching. You decide what kind of person you want to be, regardless of recognition. S is not about control over others. It's about integrity with yourself. One of the hardest parts of self-leadership is consistency between values and behavior. It's easy to say what matters. It's harder to live it. But leadership is visible in moments of alignment, not in statements of intention. People don't follow words. They follow patterns. Leading your own life also means accepting that motivation is unreliable. Purpose is not. When your actions are rooted in purpose, you don't need constant encouragement. You act because it makes sense, not because it feels good in the moment. There will be moments when you feel alone in your decisions. When the path you choose is not understood or celebrated, that's often a sign you're leading, not conforming. Popularity has never been a reliable indicator of correctness. Self-leadership requires boundaries with time, boundaries with energy, boundaries with people who drain more than they contribute. Setting boundaries is not selfish, it's strategic. You cannot lead effectively when you are constantly depleted. Another overlooked aspect of leadership is accountability. Leaders don't avoid responsibility when things go wrong. They examine their role, they learn, they adjust. Accountability is not about punishment. It's about growth. It's how standards are reinforced. When you lead your own life, excuses lose their power. Not because life becomes easier, but because you refuse to give away control. You understand that while you can't choose every circumstance, you can always choose your response. In 2026, Leadership W will not belong to the loudest voices or the most visible figures. It will belong to those who act with clarity and conviction, those who align actions with values, those who choose progress over comfort. Leading yourself doesn't mean you never doubt. It means you don't let doubt drive. Doubt informs, values decide, and something interesting happens when you lead your own life. Others notice. Not because you announce it, but because consistency creates credibility. People are drawn to those who move with intention. You don't need permission to take responsibility. You don't need validation to choose direction. You don't need applause to begin. Leadership starts quietly with a single decision. I will take ownership of my life. And once that decision is made, everything changes, not overnight, but permanently. As we step into 2026, this moment is not asking you to become someone else. It's asking you to return to yourself with clarity, courage, and intention. Resetting is about remembering why you began, not to relive the past, but to realign with what truly matters. Restarting is about having the bravery to let go of what no longer fits, even when it feels uncomfortable or unce. Refocusing is about protecting your energy, choosing depth over distraction, and committing to what deserves your best effort. Consistency reminds us that real change is not loud or dramatic. It's built quietly through daily actions that reflect our values, even when motivation fades. And leadership, real leadership, begins the moment you take responsibility for your direction instead of waiting for permission, perfect conditions, or external validation. This is not a call for perfection. It's a call for ownership. Ownership of your time, your choices, your standards, and your future. You don't need to have every answer before you begin. You only need to be clear on the principle that guide you. When your actions are rooted in purpose, progress becomes sustainable. When your focus is intentional, effort becomes meaningful. 2026 will offer distractions, challenges, and moments of doubt. That's inevitable. But it will also offer opportunity to choose alignment over approval, discipline over impulse, and clarity over chaos. The difference will not be circumstance. NCEs. The difference will be your response. Growth is not about moving faster. It's about moving with direction. Success is not about doing more. It's about doing what matters consistently. Leadership is not about control. It's about responsibility. And fulfillment is not found in achievement alone, but in integrity between who you say you are and how you live each day. So as you move forward, don't rush. Don't compare. Don't wait. Pause long enough to reset your why. Be brave enough to restart when something no longer serves you. Be disciplined enough to refocus when distractions pull you away. Show up consistently even when it's hard. And lead your own life with intention. Because when you do, progress stops feeling forced. Effort feels aligned. And success, whatever it means to you, becomes not just possible, but sustainable. 2026 is not about becoming more, it's about becoming true, and that choice is yours.